will be faithful and bear true allegiance to Zimbabwe.
On April 18, 1980, the country, now known as Zimbabwe, gained independence from Great Britain after a protracted armed liberation struggle against the colonial regime of Rhodesia. As stated in part 1 of this series, Robert Mugabe's ZANU-PF emerged as the victors in the 1980 elections after winning 57 out of the total 80 seats in parliament. The initial years of Robert Mugabe's tenure showed great promise, as literacy rates rose from 62% to 82%. The economy recorded a growth rate of 2.7% for 10 consecutive years, and Mugabe employed a policy of reconciliation with the white minority who had oppressed the black majority for years. Mugabe also sought to restore the true national identity of the country, as he renamed the capital from Salisbury to Harare, and also removed statues and colonial references of the past. Zimbabwe also attracted significant financial aid from Western countries in the hope of assisting a peaceful and orderly transition to majority rule. The USA provided Zimbabwe with a $25 million 3-year aid package, while the UK committed themselves to a land reform program where they pledged to finance the purchase of white-owned farms to be redistributed to black Zimbabweans. The UK government also agreed to facilitate the consolidation of former Rhodesian, Zanla and Zebra forces into a single united national army. Mugabe also showed magnanimity and forgiveness towards his former Rhodesian adversaries, as he retained Peter Waltz as head of the army, Ken Flower as head of the CIO, and even appointed former Rhodesian government officials as part of his cabinet. Despite Mugabe's socialist leanings, his policies were rather conservative, as the economy remained capitalist, and there was little nationalization of private businesses. In the background, there was a gradual emergence of a new ZANU-PF elitist class who displayed their affluence by purchasing large houses and flashy cars, sending their children to expensive private schools, and obtaining lucrative farms and businesses. To limit their excesses, Mugabe enacted a leadership code which prohibited any government official from owning more than 50 acres of land. Despite Mugabe's conciliatory stance with the white population, he was not successful at preventing a white exodus, as many white former Rhodesians opted to leave the country fearing retribution from the black population. Tensions between Mugabe and Nkomo still persisted, despite Mugabe appointing the latter as Minister of Home Affairs. Distrust between the two ultimately culminated when an arms cache was discovered on a ZAPU-owned farm. This sparked outrage and acute suspicion from Mugabe and other ZANU officials towards Nkomo and his ZAPU party. This resulted in Mugabe dismissing Nkomo from his cabinet and seizing ZAPU-owned assets. Mugabe subsequently descended fiercely on Nkomo and ZAPU and the Ndebele ethnic supporters. Mugabe created an auxiliary military unit known as the 5th Brigade, which was trained by North Korean military officials. The 5th Brigade was given the mandate to operate in Matabele land, where dissidents who were believed to be ex-Zebra soldiers were perpetrating acts of banditry. The 5th Brigade carried out acts of terror against the inhabitants of Matabele land, with the scale of violence regarded as more than the Rhodesian Bush War. All this chaos eventually culminated with the Unity Accord being signed in 1987. The Unity Accord was an agreement which consolidated ZANU and ZAPU into ZANU-PF, and Nkomo was appointed to the position of vice president, with Mugabe becoming president following a series of constitutional amendments which discarded the office of prime minister and issued full executive autonomy to the office of executive president. As time progressed, insufficient land reforms had occurred, which left a substantial amount of the black population feeling disgruntled, as they had seen relatively little change since independence and felt that promises made to them by the government had been reneged. In an attempt to placate the mass disillusionment by the black population, Zimbabwe's parliament enacted an amendment which enabled the government to expropriate land at a fixed price while denying landowners the right of appeal to the courts. This was a blatant contravention of the Lancaster House Agreement of 1980, where it was agreed that a willing buyer-seller system would be used for any land reform. Following these reforms, copious amounts of mostly white-owned land would be expropriated by the government. However, instead of being redistributed to landless rural peasants, the expropriated land was now in the possession of prominent ZANU-PF elites. As the 90s progressed, Zimbabwe's economy was in a gradual recession, characterized by a declining quality of life, lower wages and salaries, and surging unemployment. In addition to this, war veterans of the liberation struggle had begun demanding for their pensions, which compelled Mugabe to issue them with a pension package that would cost the country 4.2 billion Zimbabwean dollars, which further exacerbated the country's economic woes. In the midst of the country's economic turmoil, Mugabe resorted to blaming and condemning his Western adversaries and the country's white minority. He exhorted the country's black majorities to strike fear in the hearts of the white man, our real enemy. In the June 2000 parliamentary elections, Mugabe's ZANU-PF lost the parliamentary majority after facing serious competition to the new opposition party known as the Movement for Democratic Change, also known as the MDC, which was led by trade unionist Morgan Tsvangirai. The election was marred with prevalent countrywide violence as ZANU-PF sought to suppress opposition voters. During that same year, land invasions of white-owned farms became prevalent amid growing disgruntlement at the slow pace of land reform, which Mugabe saw as an opportunity to regain support, as he exploited it by disseminating anti-white rhetoric and sentiment. The government identified the land invaders as war veterans, but the majority of them were youths too young to have fought in the War of Liberation. Mugabe justified the invasions by stating that the land was merely being reoccupied after it had been dispossessed from the natives by the white settlers during the colonial epoch. In extension to this, Mugabe showed disdain for judicial verdicts, deeming the invasions as illegal, and famously stated, "The courts can do whatever they want, but no judicial decision will stand in our way." My position is that we should not even be defending our position in the courts. This country is ours, and this land is our land. They think because they are white, they have a divine right to our resources. Not here. The white man is not indigenous to Africa. Africa is for Africans. Zimbabwe is for Zimbabweans. Western nations such as the USA and Britain would subsequently impose sanctions on Zimbabwe, with the USA in particular enacting the Zidara Act, which targeted Zimbabwe's economy. The farm seizures would prove to be deleterious for the nation's food security, as the produce of staple foods such as corn would plummet significantly. The nation also became afflicted by rampant hyperinflation, and the currency would lose its value at a rapid and alarming rate. Unemployment in the country would also surge, with a shocking 80% of the population without a job. Despite these immense shortcomings, Mugabe would remain resolved to cling on to power amid massive political and economic unrest in the nation. However, in 2008, cracks would begin to emerge as he would be forced to share power with MDC leader Morgan Tsvangirai after a heavily disputed election where he failed to win a majority. He would later win the 2013 elections, which were viewed with high suspicion and controversy. In 2017, Mugabe would make a fatal mistake which would later prove to be his undoing, as he sacked his vice president Emmerson Mnangagwa, which sparked speculation that he intended to make his very unpopular wife Grace Mugabe his successor. Following this, a military intervention was made against him, and he was subsequently put under house arrest and sacked from his position as leader of ZANU-PF. Mugabe was also handed with an ultimatum whereby he would resign or face an impeachment motion. After being cornered against the wall, Mugabe opted for the former and tendered his resignation, ending his lengthy rule as leader of Zimbabwe. Mugabe's tale resonates with an adage which says, you either die as a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. As he was once a charismatic revolutionary leader who liberated his country from colonial oppression but gradually transformed into an oppressor who presided over the tremendous decline of a once prosperous nation. Thank you for watching the video. This was African Icons, and if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe for more.